Elder Kira stood at the broken window of the temple and watched his world die. The twin sons of Valar had not shown their light for 7 days now. The Drath warships covered the sky like a dark blanket, so many that Kira could not count them. Below, the great city of Solheim burned. Buildings that had stood for 1,000 years fell like children's toys. The screams of his people filled the air, mixing with the harsh sounds of Drath weapons. He was old. His blue skin had turned pale with age, and his 4 eyes had grown weak. But he had never seen anything like this. In all his years as a historian, writing about the peaceful past of the Velen people, he never thought he would write about their end. 3 cycles ago, the Drath had come with sweet words. They spoke of protection, they spoke of friendship, they spoke of trade and shared knowledge. The Velen elders, Kira among them, had welcomed them. Why would they not? The Velen had abandoned war long ago. They were scholars, artists, and healers. They saw no evil in others because they had forgotten what evil looked like. Then the Drath showed their true face. Their warships blocked the trade routes. Their soldiers marched through Valen streets. Their commander, a cold creature called Overlord Gren, announced that Valar now belonged to the Drath Dominion. The Valen had resources the Drath wanted: rare minerals, clean water, fertile land. And the Velen themselves would work to extract these things. They would be slaves. Some Velen tried to fight. They had no weapons, no training, no soldiers. They threw stones at Drath armor. They were cut down like grass. After that, the rest simply gave up. What else could they do? They sent a distress signal into the dark space beyond their world, hoping someone might hear, hoping someone might care. No one answered. The galactic community knew about the Drath. They feared the Drath. No one would risk war for a small, peaceful planet that had nothing to offer in return. Kira had accepted this truth. Help was not coming. Hope was a lie, they told children. The sound of running feet broke his thoughts. He turned to see a young Velen female enter the temple. Her name was Nira, and she had been a student of art before the invasion. Now her face was hard like stone. Her clothes were torn and covered in dust and blood. In her thin arms, she carried a body. Kira recognized it. Her brother, Tal, a boy of only 15 cycles. His eyes were closed forever. Nira laid the body on the temple floor with great care. Then she stood and looked at Kira. Her eyes burned with something the Velen had not felt for generations. Rage? They killed him, she said. Her voice was flat. He was trying to protect a child. They shot him in the back. Kira walked toward her slowly. Nira, I am sorry. Your brother was brave. Brave? She laughed, but there was no joy in it. Bravery means nothing against their weapons. Nothing means anything. She pointed at Kira with a shaking finger. You did this. You and the other elders. You made us weak. You told us peace was the only way. You told us we did not need weapons or warriors. And now we die like animals. Kira had no answer. She was right. They had been fools. Kind, peaceful, hopeful fools. Through the broken walls, they could see Drath soldiers moving through the streets. They were gathering survivors, pushing them toward large transport ships. The labor camps waited. A life of suffering waited. Death eventually waited. We should go, Kira said quietly. If we hide, perhaps hide where? Nira cut him off. They will find us. They always find us. She knelt beside her brother's body and touched his face one last time. I will not go to their camps. I will make them kill me first. Kira closed his eyes. He remembered the distress signal they had sent 8 months ago. A simple message, broadcast in all known languages, sent in all directions. We are the Velen. We are dying. Please help us. Such simple words. Such useless words. The Drath soldiers were coming closer. Kira could hear their heavy boots on the stone streets. He could hear their rough language, their cruel laughter. They enjoyed this. Breaking a peaceful people was sport to them. He opened his eyes and looked at the sky one last time. He wanted to see the twin suns before he died, but the Drath ships still blocked them. There was only darkness above. Then he saw something strange. Lights, small at first, like distant stars, but they were moving fast. They came down through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire behind them. They were not Drath ships. Kira had studied every ship in the Drath fleet. These were different, smaller, sharper. They moved with a speed he had never seen. "Nira," he whispered, "look." She stood and followed his gaze. Together, they watched the lights grow brighter. There were dozens of them, then hundreds. They punched through the clouds like arrows. Some of the Drath ships in orbit exploded. Bright flashes of light filled the sky. "What is happening?" Nira asked. Kira shook his head. He did not know. His old heart began to beat faster. Was this another enemy? Had some other empire come to take what the Drath had claimed? Would it matter? One conqueror was the same as another? But something in his chest, something he thought had died long ago, began to stir. A small, foolish thing, a thing he had no right to feel. Hope. The first of the strange ships crashed into the city center. It hit the ground hard, tearing through buildings, throwing up clouds of dust and fire. The Drath soldiers stopped. They looked up. They seemed confused. From the crashed ship, figures emerged. They walked on two legs, like the Velen, but they were shorter and thicker. They wore heavy armor that covered their bodies completely. They carried weapons that Kira did not recognize, and they began to fire. The Drath soldiers fell. 1, 2, 5, 10. They fell and did not get up. Kira stared. His mouth hung open. His 4 eyes went wide. Nira grabbed his arm. "Who are they?" she demanded. "What are they?" More ships crashed down. More armored figures poured out. The sounds of battle filled the air. The Drath, who had seemed so powerful, so unstoppable, were now running. They were afraid. Kira had never seen the Drath afraid before. He looked at the strange warriors fighting in the streets of his burning city. He did not know what they were. He did not know why they had come. But as he watched them throw themselves against the Drath with no care for their own lives, as he watched them bleed and fall and rise again, he understood one thing. These were not conquerors. These were something else entirely. And for the first time in 3 cycles, Elder Kira dared to believe that his people might survive. Captain Tae Woo stood in the briefing room of the UNSC carrier Eternal Dawn and looked at the faces of his soldiers. They were young, most of them. Boys and girls who had grown up on Earth, on Mars, on the moon colonies. They had trained for years. They had dreamed of serving humanity among the stars. Now they sat in silence, listening to words that might be the last they would ever hear. The hologram in the center of the room showed the planet below, Valar, a world of blue oceans and green forests, now scarred with fire and smoke. Around it, the Drath fleet formed a wall of metal and weapons, 400 warships. The UNSC had brought only 90. Admiral Song's voice came through the speakers, calm and clear. "The Drath outnumber us 4-1. Our fleet will engage them in orbit to create an opening. Ground forces will drop during this window. Once you are on the surface, there will be no extraction. The carriers cannot survive long enough to pull you out." Tae watched his soldiers. Some of them looked scared, some of them looked angry. None of them looked away. 8 months ago, the Admiral continued, we received a distress signal from this planet. The Velen people asked for help. They are not warriors. They have no weapons. They cannot fight. The Drath are taking their world, their resources, and their freedom. The galactic community has ignored them. Everyone has ignored them. A pause. Then the Admiral spoke again, and his voice was harder now. "We do not ignore those who cry out. That is not who we are. Not anymore." Tae thought about his grandmother. She had told him stories when he was a child. Stories about the old Earth, before humanity reached the stars. Stories about wars and suffering. Stories about times when people died because others decided it was not their problem. Those times had left deep scars on humanity's soul, scars that still hurt. When humanity finally left Earth and met other species, they made a promise. Never again would they stand by while innocents suffered. Never again would they pretend not to hear the cries of the helpless. It was a simple promise. It was also a heavy one. The briefing ended. The soldiers stood and began to move toward the drop bays. Tay walked among them, checking equipment, offering quiet words of encouragement. He stopped beside Sergeant Hana Kim, who was helping her squad prepare. Hana was a small woman, but she had the heart of a giant. Her eyes were sharp, her movements quick. She had served under Tay for 3 years. He trusted her more than he trusted himself. "How are they?" Tay asked, nodding toward her squad. Hana glanced at her soldiers. Medic Sue Park was checking medical supplies with steady hands. Private Dong Choi, the youngest, was adjusting his armor with shaking fingers. The others were quiet, focused, ready. "They are scared," Hana said honestly, "but they will not run." "And you?" She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I stopped being scared a long time ago, Captain. Now I am just angry." Tay understood. Hana had lost her family during the Mars uprising 10 years ago. She knew what it felt like to wait for help that never came. She would never let anyone else feel that pain if she could stop it. He moved on and found Private Dong standing alone, staring at his helmet. The boy was only 19. This was his first real mission. His hands would not stop shaking. "Private," Tay said softly. Dong jumped and quickly stood at attention. "Sir, I am sorry, sir. I was just scared," Tay finished for him. The boy's face turned red. He looked at the floor. "Yes, sir. I know I should not be. I trained for this, but I cannot stop thinking about what is down there. What might happen?" Tay put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Fear is not weakness, Private. Fear means you understand what is at stake. The bravest soldiers I have ever known were all afraid. They just chose to act anyway." Dong looked up. "How do you do it, sir? How do you make yourself go forward?" Tay thought about the question. "I think about the people who need me. Down there, on that planet, there are children hiding in the dark. There are parents trying to protect their families. There are old people waiting to die. They have no one else, Dong. No one is coming for them except us. And when I think about that, the fear becomes smaller. Not gone, just smaller." Dong nodded slowly. He put on his helmet. His hands were still shaking, but his eyes were clearer now. Lieutenant Jae-yoon's voice came over the intercom. "All ground forces, board your dropships. We launch in 5 minutes." Tay walked to his own dropship and climbed inside. 20 soldiers sat in 2 rows, strapped into their seats. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but he could feel their tension. He could feel their fear. He could also feel their determination. He stood at the front and looked at them. "I will not lie to you," he said. "Many of us will not come back. The Drath are strong and we are far from home. But down there, a whole world is dying. People who have never hurt anyone are being killed and enslaved. They called out for help, and we are the only ones who answered." He paused and let the words settle. "We are not here for glory. We are not here for territory. We are here because it is right. Because this is what humanity has chosen to be. The ones who answer, the ones who come, the ones who fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." He sat down and strapped himself in. "Today, we show the galaxy what humans are made of. No matter what happens, I am proud to serve with you all." The dropship shook as it launched from the carrier. Through the small window, Tay could see the battle beginning. UNSC warships clashed with Drath cruisers. Explosions bloomed like flowers of fire. Ships on both sides died in the cold vacuum of space. The dropship dove toward the planet. Anti-air fire streaked up from below. The ship next to them was hit and exploded. Tay did not look away. He could not afford to. An alarm screamed. The pilot, Lieutenant J, shouted over the intercom, "We are hit! Engine 2 is gone! Brace for hard landing!" The dropship spun. Soldiers gripped their seats. The world outside the window became a blur of fire and clouds. Tay closed his eyes and thought of his wife back on Earth. He thought of his son, who was only 3 years old. He wondered if he would ever see them again. The ship hit the ground. Metal screamed. Bodies were thrown against straps. Darkness came. When Tay opened his eyes, he was hanging upside down. Blood ran down his face. His ears rang. Around him, soldiers were groaning, coughing, trying to free themselves. He cut his straps and fell to the ceiling, which was now the floor. He helped others get free. 7 were dead. The rest were hurt but alive. The ramp was jammed. Hana planted a charge and blew it open. Hot air and the smell of smoke poured in. Tay stepped outside and saw the alien city burning around him. Tall buildings made of strange white stone crumbled. Fires painted everything in orange light. In the distance, he could see Drath soldiers marching, not yet aware that humans had landed. He checked his weapon. He looked at his soldiers, battered but standing. He thought of the scared, peaceful aliens who were waiting to die. "Move out," he said. "We have work to do." Elder Kira had seen death before. He had watched his friends grow old and pass into the eternal rest. He had stood beside his wife when she took her last breath 50 cycles ago. Death was a quiet thing to the Velen. It came gently, like sleep, like a door closing softly. This was not that kind of death. The Drath soldiers had gathered all the survivors they could find. 200 Velen, maybe more, pushed together in the central plaza. Old ones, young ones, children, crying for parents they would never see again. The Drath guards stood around them, weapons ready, waiting for the transport ships to land. Kira stood near the edge of the group. Nira was beside him, her face empty. She had stopped crying for her brother. She had stopped feeling anything at all. Kira understood. Sometimes the heart could only take so much before it went quiet. Then the sky broke open. The first human ship came down like a falling star. It was on fire. It was out of control. It crashed through a tall building and hit the ground with a sound like thunder. The impact threw dust and stone in all directions. The Drath guards stumbled. The Velen prisoners screamed. More ships followed. Some landed cleanly. Others crashed like the first. But from all of them, figures poured out. They wore armor that covered them completely. They carried weapons that flashed with light. And they came with a speed and fury that Kira had never imagined possible. The Drath opened fire. Their plasma rifles sent bright bolts of energy toward the newcomers. Some of the armored figures fell, but the others did not stop. They did not slow down. They ran straight into the fire, screaming in a language Kira did not understand. A Drath soldier near Kira raised his weapon toward the prisoners. Perhaps he planned to use them as shields. Perhaps he planned to kill them to spite the attackers. Kira would never know, because before the soldier could act, an armored figure slammed into him from the side. The figure was smaller than the Drath, but moved with incredible speed. A blade flashed. The Drath fell. The armored figure stood up and looked at the prisoners. Through the helmet's clear front, Kira saw a face, a female face, hard eyes, blood on her cheek. She spoke into a device on her wrist. More armored figures came. They formed a circle around the prisoners and began firing at the Drath guards. The sound of weapons was deafening. Light flashed everywhere. Bodies fell. Kira could not move. He could only watch. One of the armored fighters took 3 plasma bolts to the chest. He stumbled but did not fall. He kept fighting, kept shooting, kept moving. Then he saw a Velen child trapped under a piece of fallen stone. Without hesitation, he ran to the child. Plasma fire chased him. 2 more bolts hit his back. Still, he kept going. He lifted the stone with strength Kira did not think possible. He picked up the child and carried her toward the other prisoners. He made it 5 steps before he collapsed. The child was unharmed. She crawled away, crying but alive. The armored fighter lay still on the ground. Blood pooled beneath him. "What are they?" Nira whispered. Her voice shook. "What kind of creatures are these?" Kira had no answer. The Velen had never seen anything like this. They had never seen beings who would throw their bodies in front of death for strangers. They had never seen warriors who cried out with rage and pain, but kept fighting anyway. The battle ended. It had lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. All the Drath guards were dead. The armored figures stood among the bodies, breathing hard. Some of them fell to their knees. Some of them helped the wounded. Some of them simply stared at the sky. The female who had killed the first Drath guard approached the prisoners. She removed her helmet. Her face was covered in sweat and blood. Her eyes were tired but kind. She spoke, and her voice was calm. "You are safe now. We are here to help. Does anyone understand me?" Kira found his voice. "I understand. We learned many languages when we reached the stars." He paused. "Who are you?" "We are humans," she said. "From Earth. We received your distress signal." Kira's heart stopped. "That was 8 months ago." The female nodded. "It took us that long to get here. I am sorry we could not come sooner." Nira stepped forward. Her eyes were wide. "You crossed the stars because of our signal? We did not even know if anyone would hear it. We sent it without hope." The female looked at her. "We heard, and we came." A young male fighter lay nearby, wounded in the leg. He was trying to tie a bandage with shaking hands. Kira walked to him slowly. The fighter tensed, then relaxed when he saw the old Velen meant no harm. "Why?" Kira asked. His voice cracked. "Why would you die for us? We have nothing to give you. We are weak. We are not worth saving." The young fighter looked up. His face was pale with pain. He was barely more than a child himself, but his eyes were steady. "You called for help," he said simply. "What else were we supposed to do?" Kira stared at him. Such simple words, such a simple answer, as if crossing the stars to die for strangers was the most natural thing in the world, as if any other choice would be unthinkable. The Velen had sent their signal expecting nothing. They had given up hope, they had accepted death. And these creatures, these humans, had heard their cry and answered it. Not for money, not for power, not for land, just because it was the right thing to do. Kira knelt beside the young fighter and helped him tie his bandage. His old hands were clumsy, but the fighter did not complain. When it was done, the fighter nodded. "Thank you," he said. Kira shook his head. "No, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for showing us that we were not forgotten." The female called out orders. The fighters began organizing the survivors, moving them away from the plaza, away from the bodies. Kira stood and watched them work. They were tired, they were wounded, but they did not stop. Nira appeared beside him. She was watching the humans with different eyes now. Not suspicion, something else. Wonder, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. "They are not gods," she said quietly. "They bleed, they fall. They are just as mortal as we are." Kira nodded slowly. "Yes, that is what makes them terrifying." Terrifying? They know they can die. They know they probably will die, and they came anyway. He watched the young fighter limping alongside his comrades, refusing to be carried. That is not the behavior of gods. That is something more. Something I do not have a word for. Nira was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "I want to learn that word. I want to understand how they do it, how they choose to fight when all hope is gone." Kira put a hand on her shoulder. "Perhaps they will teach us." Above them, the battle in orbit still raged. Human ships and Drath ships destroyed each other in flashes of light. The outcome was uncertain. The night was still dark, but for the first time, Kira believed the dawn might actually come. Sergeant Hana Kim had not slept in 36 hours. Her body ached. Her eyes burned. A cut on her forehead had stopped bleeding, but it still hurt whenever she moved her face. None of that mattered. Sleep was for later. Sleep was for people who had time. They had taken shelter in a bombed-out building on the eastern side of the city. 53 people huddled in the darkness. 12 were human soldiers, what remained of Hana's squad, and 3 others who had found them. The rest were Velen civilians. Old ones, young ones, children who cried for their mothers, mothers who had no comfort to give. Among the Velen were the old historian, Elder Kira, and the young female, Nira. Hana had learned their names during the long march through the ruined streets. Kira spoke the human language well. Nira said very little, but her eyes watched everything. Medic Supark moved through the group, checking wounds, giving medicine. She worked without rest, her hands steady even when her face showed exhaustion. The Velen watched her with something like amazement. They had never seen a stranger care for them so completely. Private Dong Choi sat in the corner, his leg wrapped in bandages. He was the one who had been shot, saving the child. He should be resting. Instead, he was cleaning his weapon, getting ready for whatever came next. Hana felt a strange pride. The boy was growing up fast. Too fast. But that was war. The sound of explosions echoed from the distance. The Drath had regrouped. Their reinforcements were arriving from orbit. The humans had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Hana's communicator crackled. Static mostly, but then a voice. Captain Tae Woo. All units. Orbital battle lost. UNSC fleet destroyed. No extraction possible. Repeat. No extraction. The soldiers heard. None of them spoke. They had known this was likely. They had come anyway. More static. Then Tae's voice again, calmer now. All units consolidate at the old temple district. We make our stand there. Hold until we cannot hold anymore. Hana switched off the communicator. She looked at her soldiers. They looked back at her, waiting. You heard the captain, she said. We move to the temple district. Stay close. Protect the civilians. We leave no one behind. They gathered their things. The Velen moved slowly, weak from hunger and fear. Hana's soldiers helped them, carrying children, supporting the elderly. One human soldier gave his last ration bar to a Velen child who had not eaten in 2 days. As they prepared to leave, Nira stepped in front of Hana. Her face was hard, her eyes cold. Why do you do this? She asked. Why do you die for us? What do you want in return? Hana studied her. She saw the suspicion. She understood it. Nira had watched her people be betrayed by the Drath. She had learned not to trust. We want nothing, Hana said. Everyone wants something. Hana was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was soft. My grandmother told me stories when I was a child. Stories about old Earth. Stories about times when we let people die because it was not our problem, because they were too far away, because helping them was too hard or too expensive. She paused. Those times still haunt us. We swore we would never be that way again. When someone calls for help, we answer. That is who we try to be now. Nira's eyes flickered. The hardness did not disappear, but something shifted behind it. And if you all die here, if none of you go home, will your people be angry that you wasted your lives for strangers? Hana thought about her parents on Mars, her little brother who was studying medicine, her friends back on the carrier who were probably dead now. They will be sad, she admitted, but they will not call it a waste. They will call it a choice, our choice, and they will be proud that we made it. Nira said nothing more. But she stayed close to Hana as they began to move through the ruined streets. The night was dark. Valar had no moon, and the stars were hidden behind the smoke of burning buildings. Hana led the group through alleys and collapsed tunnels, avoiding the main roads where Drath patrols were hunting. Twice they almost walked into enemy soldiers. Twice Hana's squad killed the patrols before they could call for help. The Velen watched in silence. They were not used to such violence. But they were starting to understand that violence, sometimes, was the only language that evil understood. Elder Kira walked beside Hana. His old legs struggled with the pace, but he refused to be carried. "I have been thinking," he said quietly, "about what you are. And what have you decided? You are frightened. All of you. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voices, but you act anyway. You push the fear down and do what must be done." He paused. The Velen forgot how to do that. "We thought peace meant never facing darkness. We were wrong. Peace must be protected. And protection requires people who are willing to face their fear." Hana nodded. "Fear is not the enemy. Giving up is the enemy." They reached the entrance to an old tunnel system. Kira explained that it ran beneath the entire city, connecting ancient temples and libraries. The Velen had used it for ceremonies once. Now it would be their path to safety. They entered the tunnels. The air was cold and damp. Strange carvings covered the walls, glowing faintly with old light. Kira said they told the history of the Velen people, their rise, their golden age, their choice to abandon war. "Beautiful," Sue whispered as she walked past a mural showing Velen children playing in a field. Dong limped beside her. "Do you think they regret it, giving up fighting?" Sue considered. "I think they did what they thought was right. They wanted a better world. They just did not expect that world to have monsters in it." Behind them, the sound of fighting erupted. The rear guard was engaged. Plasma fire lit the tunnel entrance. Screams echoed off the stone walls. Hana ran back. 2 of her soldiers were down. The Drath had found them. A squad of enemy troops poured into the tunnel, weapons blazing. "Get the civilians moving," Hana shouted. "I will hold them here." She took cover behind a fallen pillar and returned fire. 1 Drath fell, then another, but more came. They always had more. Private Dong appeared beside her, his wounded leg forgotten. He fired with steady hands, his young face set with determination. "I am not leaving, Sergeant. I did not ask you to. She killed another Drath. Just do not die. I hate writing letters to families." The battle was brutal and short. The Drath learned quickly that the tunnel was a death trap. Human weapons tore through them. When the last enemy fell, Hana counted her losses. 2 dead, 3 wounded. The price of 1 more hour of survival. They caught up with the others. The tunnel continued for what felt like forever. But finally, they emerged into a vast open space. The Temple of First Light. Ancient and beautiful, its walls carved with symbols of peace and hope. Captain Tae-woo was there. He looked battered and tired, but he was alive. Beside him stood other human soldiers, maybe 100 in total, and behind them, thousands of Velen refugees gathered from across the city. Tae saw Hana and walked to her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he put a hand on her shoulder. "Glad you made it. Would not miss it, Captain." They looked at the refugees. So many faces, so much fear, and so few humans to protect them all. "What now?" Hana asked. Tae took a deep breath. "Now we wait. And when they come, we make them pay for every inch of ground." Outside the temple, in the darkness of the alien night, the Drath army was gathering. The final battle was coming. Hana checked her weapon. She thought about home. She thought about everyone who would never see her again. Then she pushed those thoughts aside and prepared to fight. The Temple of First Light had stood for 3,000 years. It had seen the rise of Velen civilization, the great discoveries, the golden age of peace. Now it saw something new, something that would change the Velen forever. Elder Kira walked through the crowded halls and watched. 3,000 of his people huddled in every corner, every room, every space. They were hungry, they were scared, many were wounded, but they were alive. Because of the humans. 200 human soldiers moved among them. They shared their food, gave their medicine, stood guard at every entrance. They should be resting. They had fought without sleep for 2 days, but they did not rest. They worked. Kira stopped beside a group of human soldiers who were eating their rations in silence. One of them, a young female, was humming a soft tune. Her hands were wrapped in bloody bandages, but her voice was gentle. "What is that song?" Kira asked. The female looked up. "It is a lullaby. My mother sang it to me when I was a child." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I sing it when I am scared. It reminds me of home." "You are scared?" She laughed softly. "Of course. I am terrified. We all are." Kira sat beside her. "I do not understand. You fight as if you have no fear. You charge into danger. You throw your bodies in front of death." The female, whose name was Sue, shook her head. "That is not fearlessness. That is choice. We feel the fear. We just refuse to let it control us." She went back to humming. Other soldiers nearby listened. Some of them had tears in their eyes. They were far from home. They would probably never see it again. And still, they hummed along. Kira moved on. He found Captain Tae Woo standing at a window, looking out at the dark city. The human leader was badly wounded. His arm was in a sling. Cuts covered his face, but his eyes were clear and focused. "Captain," Kira said, "may I speak with you?" Tae turned. "Of course, Elder. What is on your mind?" "I am trying to understand your people. I have studied many species in my life. I thought I understood the universe, but you confuse me." Tae smiled slightly. "We confuse ourselves sometimes. You know you will probably die here. Your fleet is destroyed. No help is coming. And yet you do not surrender. You do not try to escape. Why?" Tae was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "When I was a boy, my father told me a story. It was about a soldier from long ago, on Earth, in a war called World War II. This soldier was part of a unit that was surrounded by enemies. They had no food, no water, almost no ammunition. The enemy commander sent them a message: surrender or die." He paused. The soldier looked at his comrades. They were tired. They were scared. They knew they could not win. But the soldier wrote back a single word. Just one word. He wrote, "No." Did they survive? Some did. Most did not. But they held their ground, and their resistance inspired others. It showed that even when all hope was lost, humans could still stand, could still fight, could still say no. Kira nodded slowly. "And that is what you are doing now." "Yes." Tae looked out the window. "The Drath think they have won. They think we are beaten. But every hour we hold this temple, we prove them wrong. We show the galaxy that there are still those who refuse to kneel. Maybe someday that will matter. Maybe it will inspire others to stand." A commotion at the temple entrance drew their attention. A Drath messenger had approached under a white flag. The human soldiers held their fire, but kept their weapons ready. The messenger spoke in a loud voice, projecting Overlord Gren's words: "Surrender the humans, and the Velen will be spared. You have one cycle to decide. If you refuse, we will destroy the temple and everyone inside." Silence fell over the crowd. The Velen looked at the humans looked at each other. Kira felt his heart sink. He knew what the Velen elders were thinking. If they gave up the humans, they might live. It would be a betrayal, yes, but survival was survival. He waited for someone to speak. He waited for the elders to suggest negotiation. He waited for the fear to win. Instead, a small voice cut through the silence. A Velen child, no more than 6 cycles old, walked forward. She had lost her parents in the first attack. She had been carried through the battle by a human soldier who died saving her. She stood in the center of the temple, looking up at the gathered crowd. "They stay," she said. Her voice was small but clear. "They are our friends now." The silence stretched. Then, one by one, the Velen began to stand. They moved forward, placing themselves beside the human soldiers. Farmers and teachers, artists and healers, people who had never held a weapon in their lives. Nira was among the first. She walked to stand beside Sergeant Hana. Their eyes met, no words were needed. Elder Kira felt something shift inside him, something old and forgotten. The Velen had chosen peace 3,000 years ago because they believed it was the highest virtue. They had been wrong. Peace without courage was not virtue. It was cowardice. True virtue was standing beside those who fought for you, even when you could not fight yourself. He walked forward and joined the others. The Drath messenger watched in confusion. He had expected surrender. He had expected the weak to abandon the strong. That was how the galaxy worked. The strong ruled. The weak served. But these creatures, these humans, had broken the rules. And now the Velen were breaking them too. The messenger left. The decision had been made. Captain Tay looked at the crowd of Velen standing with his soldiers. His eyes were wet, though his voice was steady. "Thank you," he said simply. The night passed slowly. Humans and Velen sat together, sharing stories. Sue taught some Velen children a song from Earth. Private Dong sat quietly beside Nira, both of them watching the stars through a hole in the temple roof. "Why do you stay so close to me?" Dong asked finally. He was embarrassed, but curious. Nira was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her pouch and pulled out a small bead. It was blue, the color of grief. "This is a mourning bead," she said. "We give them to those who have helped us through loss. You saved me in the tunnel. You risked your life when you did not have to." She pressed the bead into his hand. "You are part of my story now. I will not forget." Dong looked at the bead. His throat felt tight. "I was just doing my job." "No," Nira shook her head. "You were being human." "I think I am starting to understand what that means." Dawn was coming. The twin suns would rise soon, and with them, the Drath army. Kira found a quiet corner and began to write. He was a historian. This was what he did. He would record everything. The fear, the courage, the moment when his people remembered how to stand. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would know. The galaxy would remember. The humans came, and they taught us what it meant to hope. The twin suns rose over Valar, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It would have been beautiful if not for the army waiting below. Captain Tae-Woo stood on the temple walls and counted the enemy. Thousands of Drath soldiers surrounded the temple. Tanks rolled through the ruined streets. Gunships circled overhead. Commander Voss, Overlord Gren's personal enforcer, led them. He was famous for his cruelty. He was famous for never leaving survivors. Tay had 200 soldiers. Half of them were wounded. They had limited ammunition, no air support, and no way out. It should have felt hopeless. Somehow, it did not. He looked at his soldiers taking positions along the walls. They checked their weapons. They made quiet jokes. They helped the Velen civilians move to the inner chambers where they would be safer. There was no panic, no despair, just calm, steady determination. Sergeant Hana Kim appeared beside him. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. "They will hit us from 3 sides," she said. "Main assault through the front gates, flanking teams through the eastern and western courtyards. Recommendations? We hold the gates as long as possible. When they break through, we fall back to the inner temple. Make them fight for every room, every corridor." She paused. "It will buy time. I do not know for what, but it will buy time." Tay nodded. Time. That was all they could offer now. Time for the Velen to hope. Time for the galaxy to see. Time for someone, somewhere, to decide that what was happening here mattered. "Tell the soldiers to make every shot count," he said. "And, Hana?" "Yes, Captain? I am glad you are here." She smiled, just slightly. "Would not be anywhere else." The Drath began their advance. They came slowly at first, testing the defenses. Human rifles barked. Drath soldiers fell. But for every one that dropped, 5 more took their place. The first wave hit the gates. The fighting was brutal. Plasma, fire, and bullets filled the air. Bodies piled up on both sides. A human soldier fell, and 2 more stepped forward to take their place. a draft tank crashed through the eastern wall, and Lieutenant J dropped a grenade into its open hatch before rolling away. J, the pilot, he should not even be on the ground. His dropship was destroyed. He had nowhere else to go. So, he picked up a rifle and joined the fight. Jay, Tay shouted over the noise, get to cover. With respect, Captain, I will cover myself when the shooting stops. Jay fired 3 more rounds and dropped a draft officer. Besides, I still owe these creatures for destroying my ship. Tay wanted to argue. There was no time. More enemies were pouring through the broken wall. He led a counterattack, pushing them back long enough to seal the breach with debris. An hour passed. Then 2. The defenses held, but barely. The dead were everywhere. Humans, draft. The temple floor was slick with blood from 2 different species. Commander Voss lost patience. He ordered the gunships to begin their attack. Missiles rained down on the temple, blasting holes in the ancient walls. Soldiers and civilians alike were killed. The beautiful carvings, 3,000 years old, crumbled to dust. We cannot take much more of this, Hana shouted. Tay knew she was right. They needed to do something desperate. He looked at Lieutenant J, who was reloading near a broken window. J, your dropship, is any of it still flying? J stared at him. Half of one engine works. The controls are damaged. Why? Can you get it in the air? For about 30 seconds before it falls apart. Maybe less. Tay pointed at the draft artillery positions in the distance. They were the source of the gunship missiles. Without them, the air assault would stop. Jay understood. His face went pale, then calm. I can reach them, he said quietly. I can crash into them. Jay, I am not ordering you to do this. I know. Jay smiled. It was a real smile, full of peace. My sister always said I was too reckless. Maybe she was right. He held out his hand. Tay shook it. Tell her I was not scared. At the end, I was not scared at all. He ran toward the crashed dropship in the courtyard. Somehow, impossibly, he got it into the air. The broken engines screamed. Smoke poured from the hull. It flew like a wounded bird, barely staying aloft. The draft gunships turned to intercept. Too slow. Jay was already diving toward the artillery positions. His last transmission crackled through the comms. For Earth, for everyone who called for help, see you on the other side. The dropship hit the artillery camp like a meteor. The explosion lit up the sky. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition cooked off. When the fire cleared, the draft artillery was gone. And so was Lieutenant J. Yoon. Hana was crying. Tay felt tears on his own face. But there was no time to mourn. The battle was still raging. Commander Voss, enraged by the loss of his artillery, led a personal assault on the temple. His elite soldiers broke through the main gates. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in the outer chambers. Tay found himself face to face with Voss. The draft commander was massive, towering over the human captain. His armor was thick. His blade was long and cruel. You are the leader, Voss growled. I will enjoy killing you. They fought. Voss was stronger, Tay was faster. The draft blade cut deep into Tay's side. Blood poured from the wound, but Tay did not stop. He ducked under another swing and drove his own blade into a gap in Voss's armor. The draft commander staggered. Tay pulled out the blade and stabbed again. And again. Voss fell to his knees, dark blood pouring from his wounds. How? Voss whispered. You are just a mortal, just a weak creature of flesh and bone. Tay stood over him, swaying, barely conscious. That is what makes us strong. We know we can die. We just choose not to give up. Voss collapsed. He did not rise again. But the battle was not over. More draft poured through the breaches. Hana and her squad held the main corridor in a desperate last stand. Medic Sue Park was hit while protecting a group of Velen children. She fell, and Private Dong caught her. Sue, stay with me. She looked at him with fading eyes. Keep them safe, Dong. Promise me. I promise. I promise. She smiled and closed her eyes. She did not open them again. Dong screamed. He picked up Sue's medical kit and kept working. Tears streamed down his face, but his hands were steady. He had made a promise. The temple shook. Not from Drath weapons, from something else, something above. Tay looked at the sky through a broken ceiling. New lights, new ships, dozens of them, hundreds. They were descending through the atmosphere, and they were not Drath. His communicator crackled with a new signal. A human voice. A voice from Earth. This is Admiral Moon of the UNSC Second Fleet. We received your distress signal 3 weeks ago and pushed our engines beyond safe limits to reach you. Hold on, we are coming. Reinforcements. Impossible, beautiful. Reinforcements. The new fleet tore through the Drath warships in orbit. Dropships landed outside the temple, fresh soldiers pouring out. The Drath, caught between the defenders and the new attackers, began to retreat. Tay fell to his knees. Blood loss was making his vision fade. But he was smiling. They had held. Against all odds, against all logic, they had held. Hana ran to him. She caught him before he hit the ground. Stay with me, Captain. Help is here. You cannot die now. I am not dying, he whispered. Just resting. We did it, Hana. We bought enough time. She held him as the medics arrived. Around them, the sounds of battle faded. The Drath were running. The humans were cheering. And somewhere, in the heart of the temple, the Velen were singing. 3 months had passed since the liberation of Valar. Elder Kira walked through the streets of Solheim, and for the first time in years, he heard laughter. Children played in the squares. Workers rebuilt the fallen buildings. Merchants opened their shops. Life had returned to the city. It was not the same as before. The scars of war would never fully heal, but it was life, and that was a miracle. Human engineers worked alongside Velen builders, teaching them how to construct defenses. Not for conquest, never for conquest, for protection. The Velen were learning that peace was not the absence of strength. Peace was the choice to use strength wisely. Kira watched a group of human soldiers playing a game with Velen children. They kicked a round ball back and forth, laughing when someone missed. The children were not afraid of the armored warriors anymore. They had learned that the armor hid kind hearts. The Temple of First Light had been repaired. Its walls were new, but the spirit was ancient. Today, it would host a ceremony of remembrance. Kira made his way to the temple slowly. His old legs ached, but he would not miss this. He had earned the right to be there. He had witnessed everything. The temple courtyard was filled with people. Humans and Velen stood together, shoulder to shoulder. There was no separation, no division. They were all survivors now. They were all family. At the center of the courtyard stood a new monument, a tall pillar of white stone, carved with names, human names, Velen names, the names of those who had died in the battle for Valar. Each name was written in both languages, side by side. Lieutenant J. Yoon, Medic Sue Park, Private Han, Private Lee, Elder Mira, Child Tal. The list went on. Hundreds of names, hundreds of lives that would never return, but their sacrifice would never be forgotten. Captain Tae-woo stood before the monument. He was still healing. His arm was in a sling, and he walked with a limp. But his eyes were clear, and his voice was strong. "We did not come here to be heroes," he said. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "We did not come for glory or for conquest. We came because you needed us, because someone, somewhere, cried out for help. And that is what humanity has chosen to be. Not conquerors, not rulers, just the ones who answer." He looked at the names on the monument. These people gave their lives for a world they had never seen, for people they had never met. They will never go home. They will never see their families again. But they died. knowing that their sacrifice mattered. They died knowing that because of them, others would live. He turned back to the crowd. That is the legacy we carry. That is the promise we keep. As long as there are stars in the sky and people who cry out in the darkness, humanity will answer. We will come, we will fight, and we will never abandon those who need us. The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the Velen began to sing. It was an old song from before the war, a song of gratitude and hope. One by one, the humans joined in, humming the melody, even though they did not know the words. When the song ended, the ceremony was over, but no one left. Humans and Velen stayed together, talking, sharing food, remembering those who had fallen. Kira found Nira standing near the monument. She had changed in the past 3 months. The anger was still there, but it was no longer cold. It had been forged into something stronger. Purpose. She wore a new uniform, the first joint defense force between humans and Velen. She had trained harder than anyone. She had learned to fight not for revenge, but for protection. "Elder," she said when she saw him, "I was hoping to see you." "And I you? How is the training?" "Hard. The humans are demanding, but fair." She paused. "They push us because they believe we can be strong. No one has believed in us like that for a long time." Private Dong Choi approached. He too had changed. The scared boy was gone. In his place stood a young man, calm and confident. The battles had left scars on his body and his heart, but they had also left wisdom. Nira turned to him. She reached into her pouch and pulled out another bead. This one was gold, the color of deep connection. "This is for you," she said softly. "Among my people, we give this to those who have become part of our family, not by blood, by choice." Dong took the bead carefully. His eyes were wet. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," Nira smiled. It was the first real smile Kira had seen from her since the war began. "You just have to stay. Be my friend. Walk beside me in whatever comes next." Dong closed his hand around the bead. "I will, I promise." Kira watched them together. Two young people from different worlds, bound by shared suffering and shared hope. This was the future. Not war, not fear, just people choosing to stand together. He walked away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner of the temple. He sat down and opened his journal. It was almost full now. 3 months of writing, 3 months of recording everything that had happened. He thought about how to end it. He had written about the fear, the despair, the moment when all hope had seemed lost. He had written about the strange lights in the sky, the warriors descending from the stars, the impossible courage of mortal beings. Now he needed to write the ending. He picked up his pen and began. "When I first saw Earth's warriors descend from the sky, I thought our hope was gone. I thought we had merely traded one conqueror for another. I was wrong. I was so wonderfully, beautifully wrong. They taught us that strength is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be ruled by it. They taught us that strangers can become family, and that some beings will cross the stars not for power or profit, but simply because someone, somewhere, cried out for help. We called into the void, expecting silence. Instead, we found humanity, and they answered. The Drath are gone now. Overlord Gren's fleet was destroyed. The war for Valar is over, but the friendship between our peoples has just begun. Human engineers help us rebuild. Human soldiers train our defenders. Human families have started to settle on our world, and Velen families have started to travel to Earth. We are no longer alone, and we never will be again. I am old. I do not know how many cycles I have left, but I am grateful for the ones I have. I am grateful that I lived to see this day. I am grateful that my people learned in the darkest hour what it means to hope. The twin suns rise over Valar. For the first time in years, we look up without fear. The sky is clear. The future is bright. And somewhere across the stars, our friends are watching over us. This is the end of my account. But it is not the end of the story. The story will continue, written by those who come after us, humans and Velen together. May it be a story of peace. May it be a story of courage. May it be a story that the galaxy will remember. We were saved, not by gods, not by miracles, by people, just people. People who chose to be brave. Kira closed his journal. He looked up at the twin suns shining through the temple window. Warm light touched his face. He smiled. The long night was over. A new dawn had come. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the Velen were ready to face it.